the official home of all deplorables for the 2018 midterm election. This is the Todd Starnes Show.
And if you see anybody from that cabinet in a restaurant, in a department store, at a gasoline station, you get out and you create a crowd. And you push back on them. And you tell them they're not welcome anymore, anywhere.
All right, I told you, ladies and gentlemen, that we were going to keep playing that soundbite from Maxine Waters for an indefinite amount of time, because you need to understand the level of vitriol that's out there in the political atmosphere. It's really bad. Congressman Jason Lewis wrote a terrific column on FoxNews.com. He says, and this is the headline, violent political threats are serious and starting to spin dangerously out of control. Congressman Lewis represents Minnesota's 2nd Congressional District, and he joins us now on the Newsmaker line. Congressman, thank you very much for taking time.
You bet. Glad to be here, Todd.
All right, let's talk about this. You yourself have experienced some of these threats. Tell us what's happened to you.
Well, first of all, I mean, I would have thought after the tragedy of the Steve Scalise shooting that people would have got real serious about this and cooler heads would have prevailed and some responsible folks would have reined in the dangerous impulses. Unfortunately, it's only getting worse. So, yeah, about a year ago, last August, my neighbor's children were frightened because there were a number of left-wing activists protesting on my front lawn and on my porch. They scared the neighbor's kids. They called their father. Their father called me. We had to summon the police. But as I said in the column, that's nothing compared to what some of the threats have been to, say, my freshman colleague Brian Mast, whose 3 children were threatened with death by an unhinged individual. Senator Paul was attacked. We've seen these vicious tweets basically inciting some of the more unstable elements in society to do something dumb. And here's the thrust of the piece, Todd. It's one thing to say, okay, that's a horrible thing, and we all realize that, those of us that have that sense of rationality left. But it's also to remain silent and not condemn it, not to rein in these impulses is equally as troubling. Chuck Schumer was sort of backed into it the other day, but where are folks in Minnesota? Where's the Democrat Party in Minnesota, in Virginia, in California, in Oregon? Why aren't there leaders coming out and stopping this?
Well, it's
Congressman. That bothers me.
Congressman, it's not just that the Democrats are quiet, but you've got the mainstream media folks out there egging them on. You write about Jennifer Rubin from the Washington Post. I want to play a soundbite. Again, this is Jennifer Rubin saying people like Sarah Sanders, people need to go after Trump administration officials. Here's Jennifer Rubin.
It's perfectly civil to do that. No one's telling them to be violent protesters. But we're not going to let these people go through life unscathed. Sarah Huckabee has no right to live a life of no fuss, no muss after lying to the press, after inciting against the press. These people should be made uncomfortable, and I think that's a life sentence, frankly.
Congressman, this is from the Washington Post.
Well, the Washington Post has lost a lot of credibility since the new ownership. They've become basically the opposition research arm of the Democrat Party, and that's a tragedy of the great paper. But I will say what this really is, Todd, as you're getting to, is it's an attack on the First Amendment. It's a censorious conduct meant to silence anyone who disagrees with you. And this actually started right after the president was elected. We would get some very, very aggressive phone calls saying, if you don't go after the president, if you don't agree with us, then you're not representing me, and I reserve the right to do anything I want to make certain you do what I think you ought to do. That's an assault on your freedom of thought, your freedom of speech, the entire First Amendment, and that's really what's at stake here. And it's the hallmark of anarchy.
Well, and you write about that in the piece, and it's a terrific piece, folks, over at foxnews.com on the opinion page. But when you go back and you sort of analyze what's really happening here, I wonder, Congressman, how much of this is coming out of the university system and the public education system, where they're teaching kids that you have a right to silent speech that you disagree with or political thought you disagree with.
I mean, I don't think there's any question about that. The speech code started to flourish when I was in college. And, I was a lot of fun before running water. I mean, it was a long time ago. And so this movement on the campus is sort of a precursor to what's happening now, and it's a dangerous righteousness when you are so convinced that the ends justify the means because your cause is better than other people's. That's how tyranny begins, and that's what we're seeing here is this dangerous righteousness. And it's, look, I've said it for a long time, and I'll keep saying it, but part of the problem with modern day liberalism is getting people to do things they wouldn't otherwise do. So we want to take 40% of your income. We want to shove you in a federally approved healthcare exchange that doesn't work. But I don't want to do that. So what's the result? The result is, well, we're going to have to force you to do that. So, and how do you force somebody to do it? And I'm afraid, and I hope I'm wrong, but I'm afraid that we're starting to see the beginning of that.
No, I think you're absolutely right, Congressman, which is why, I think people need to understand what's about to come at them, especially with the president's nominee for the Supreme Court. The Democrats are already out there, and some of the vitriol is just unbelievable. He hasn't even named the person yet, and,
I was going to say,
it's unbelievable.
How do you oppose a nominee that hasn't been named?
It's outrageous, but again, I think it speaks to the level of hostility out there in the country. Congressman, what is the answer here? How do we stop this?
Well, let's invoke the words of a famous president by the name of Barack Obama. Elections have consequences. It was a couple of years ago, and the Republicans were upset, and they wanted the president to work with them. And President Obama told them, well, look, elections have consequences. I won. I've got a pin. So they've been trying to overturn the 2016 election for a year and a half, and it hasn't worked. In fact, if anything, I think the country's coming around to what the 115th Congress and what the administration is trying to do on many fronts. So they're panicking and they're becoming a lot more aggressive. You know what? You got to have faith in the American people. You have to have faith that elections matter and that the peaceful transition of power ought to play out. And if you don't, then we're going to have a country that our parents wouldn't recognize pretty soon.
And that's what concerns me. Over the weekend, we had the kid in Texas at the burger joint who got attacked simply for wearing a "Make America Great Again" ball cap. You've got one of your colleagues, Congressman Lee Zeldin. Some guy tried to run over some of his supporters. That guy's in jail now. But it seems to me, though, that you folks in Congress can really set an example by punishing Maxine Waters. And I know that Congressman Andy Biggs, he's got the resolution censuring Maxine Waters. Do you think anything's going to happen with that?
Well, it's a fine line, isn't it? On the one hand, you say, look, this cannot be tolerated by a sitting member of Congress who ought to be setting an example and reining in this aggressiveness. On the other hand, you don't want to make a victim out of someone that doesn't deserve to be a victim. So I can see both sides of it. But what I think is it goes to my sort of skepticism for there ought to be a law for everything or a resolution or something. No, there ought to be a cultural outrage to threatening your political opponents over policy differences. And everybody in Minnesota, too, everybody in the state of Minnesota, everybody in the country ought to be chiming in, making it very, very difficult for people to preach this stuff, not because they're going to threaten them, but because they're going to express how offended they are. And until that happens, I don't think it's going to change.
All right. Congressman, we're going to have to leave it there. Really appreciate you coming on the program today. Congressman Jason Lewis, ladies and gentlemen, the headline, violent political threats are serious and starting to spin dangerously out of control. You can read that at foxnews.com. Congressman, thank you.
Thank you, Todd.
Folks, I just want to say that that something needs to happen with Maxine Waters. I hear what the congressman just said, but we need to set an example with Maxine Waters, and that means that your lawmakers, our elected representatives in Congress, need to censure her. She needs to be punished by her fellow lawmakers for what she did. Because let me tell you something. What happened at that Whataburger in San Antonio, Texas? Maxine Waters owns that, and so does Jennifer Rubin. What happened outside the campaign office here in Long Island, New York? Maxine Waters owns that. And it's time for Maxine Waters to stand up. And here's, you know what, I want to offer a caveat. I would be okay with her not being censured if Maxine Waters would stand up in the Capitol building on national television and apologize for the remarks she made in Los Angeles. And then, ladies and gentlemen, I would be okay if Maxine Waters told her followers, told all of those minions, those thugs and those thugettes, I would be okay if she told them to stand down. I'd be okay with that. But something's got to happen here, folks.